Kathy Pike, coach, author, and founder of the Academy for Coaching with Horses, shares ideas on energy awareness, heartspace, and living a more authentic life. Welcome to today's episode of Spirit and Energy Podcast. Welcome, everyone. This is Dan Johnson, and you're listening to episode 3 of Spirit and Energy Podcast. This episode is brought to you by Performance Mastery Coaching and Consulting and Vibrational Intelligence Intuitive Readings. Visit www.performancemastery.com and vibrationalintelligence.com. Today's guest is Kathy Pike, a pioneer in the field of equine facilitated learning and coaching. She's dedicated to raising human consciousness through interaction with horses, all animals, and Mother Earth. During her 20s and 30s, Kathy lived in the woods in remote locations for extended periods of time. This provided her with the ability to be attuned to the subtleties, complexities, and rhythms of nature. She is an experienced speaker, coach, and facilitator. I first met Kathy about 15 years ago and was impressed by her blend of competent coaching and energy work. I was so impressed that I asked her to give a presentation and a workshop to a Midwest chapter of the International Coach Federation. Kathy is the author of Hope from the Heart of Horses, How Horses Teach Us About Presence, Strength, and Awareness. Welcome, Kathy.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
So you've got such a varied background and a lot of expertise under your belt. When someone asks you, what do you do? What do you say to them?
Well, the current answer, because you know me, it changes and shifts as I morph and evolve and grow myself. But currently, my answer is that I bring humans together with horses so that humans can expand in their awareness around their emotional intelligence, spiritual leadership, and anything else that they want to discover about themselves on their journey of growth and expansion.
And what is it that drew you to horses? What is it about that animal or your experience with horses that you feel really brings value and benefit for interaction with humans and in the work that you do?
Yeah, it's a bit of a long story, so I won't go into the whole story, but essentially the horses ended up coming into my life, kind of showing up repetitively. And I had an experience with a horse in a round pen where the horse kind of turned and really brought all of its energy towards me. And in that moment, I felt the presence within my body completely leave my body. And I was so aware of that moment of dissociation. And then realizing that in order to really be in communication with the horse, I needed to be strong. I needed to own my space. I needed to come back into my body and be fully present. And I was able to do that in those moments. And the teaching that I got from that horse, the understanding of myself and how I am around powerful figures was so instant, but also within my body. And then the correction of my behavior with that horse was also in my body. And it gave me a different understanding and a different way to shift than an intellectual coaching conversation would. The change was very quick. It was right in my face. I knew I had to change. I had to do it. And it made me realize I can spend 3 months coaching somebody, but I can get them with a horse and they can have their breakthrough 10 times faster.
Wow. And
so from there, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was just saying, I like how you said it was a real visceral experience and it happened really quickly. It wasn't just a head exercise.
Exactly. It was I could just feel myself going out and I could feel myself coming back in too. And, I've have my own horses now. I've been around the horses now for about 14 years. And I still get challenged at times when they get really big or when they're being edgy. So I continue to grow with my understanding of how to interplay with really powerful beings, and sometimes powerful beings that are not happy. And there's other lessons. It's not just all about, power and presence or boundaries. Sometimes it's the more subtle lessons about understanding energy and how we interact in communication and relationship with another Because with a horse, of course, you can't talk about it. You have to feel it. You have to sense it. You have to find levels of communication that go beyond the verbal.
Yeah, there's so much I want to ask about this. I want to talk about your work with people and horses, but backing up a little bit, with your experience with horses, I'm sure listeners are curious, what do horses get about humans? What do they pick up about us based on your experience? What do you think they pick up about us or our energy? What do they think of us? What's your sense on that?
Yeah, well, you've actually kind of answered your question in the sense that they pick up on the energy. Horses, they pick up on our posture, they pick up on our energy, they pick up on what we're presenting through our body, through our emotions, through our heart, and through our heads. And what many humans don't understand is that we have pretty high levels of incongruence and incoherence within our bodies quite often. And so when you want to be in the herd and you want to be with horses, horses won't trust people who are incoherent, who are not congruent. And congruent means that, what you're thinking and what you're feeling is aligned. But coherence means that you're living from the heart and that your heart feeds your brain. And if your heart's not connected at that place of expansion and openness, horses pick up on that, and they're not going to be as ready to engage with those individuals that are not aware of their energy and not able to change their energy. So the horses become this beautiful mirror of a human's consciousness and gives the human an opportunity in that moment, just like I did in the round pen, to change consciousness. And it can be a very subtle change, as changing the rate in which a person is breathing, changing the internal dialogue that they're entertaining, which is feeding every single cell in their body. When the human being is in any level of fear, then obviously the chemistry of the body also is producing hormones and chemicals that are based in fear. And horses, being highly sensitive animals that not only sense energy, but smell the chemistry of a human being, they're going to pick up on that also. And that's telling them something about the human beings that they're interacting with. They want harmony, they want coherence, they want congruency, because in that space, a horse feels safe. Then when the predator comes and somebody within their herd gets lit up from fear, they know how to respond to that and they can move to safety. Often people actually represent those predators. They come in with a lot of fear, a lot of busy brain, a lot of distracted energy. They're not centered. They're not in their heart space. So yeah, again, they're just beautiful animals to be mirrors for us.
Where do you think that sensitivity within the horse comes from? I heard you say a piece about safety. Is that where it came from? Is that part of the evolution of horses? Is that they have to be on high alert to remain safe? Where does that sensitivity come from?
I do think that quite a bit of it comes from that. I have a Mustang that was wild until he was 5.5, and especially when I first got him, his level of sensitivity to anything in the environment was over the top, which when we get talking about introverts, we can touch base on that also. But horses are extremely sensitive to their environment because they have to pick up through their bodies, through their hearing, through their smell, anything that's in the environment that's going to eat them, because they're animals that are preyed upon. They're natural grazers. They don't kill things. They are the ones that get eaten. So they have to be ready for that mountain lion that could be perched on the rocks. So for my Mustang, he lived out there in the wild. He lived with those animals. And for him, it was a matter of life or death. The domesticated horses are not going to have that level of sensitivity because they just have generations of not having to be at that level of high awareness. But that's part of it. Another huge piece is the orientation of their eyes. Our eyes are front and forward. We're predators. Human beings are predators. Horses have eyes on the side of their head. And so the way that they see the world is also very different. They can see about, I think it's 360 degrees, maybe 350 degrees around their body. There's a spot in the front they can't see and a spot in the back that they can't see. So their
Fascinating.
way of, yeah, the way of being in the world is completely different than the predator psychology.
What do you notice about people, like your clients and people, when they come in contact with horses? What do you notice or see in the person as they're working with a horse or just coming in contact with a horse?
Yeah, well, when I'm working with individuals with the horses, I'm very much focused on, um, we're all working together in a sense. No matter what they're doing, I'm supporting and helping the process. I'm listening to my horses and watching the body language of my horses and how they're interacting with that human being to kind of know where to take the conversation or how to support. But primarily, when I'm supporting, I'm helping the human being realize where their incongruencies are through their thought and their feeling. I'm helping that individual come into the present moment. I'm helping them become more heart centered, also guiding them to have a conversation with their own body so that they can understand any unconscious energies that are hanging out in their space that would be beneficial for them to clear so that they could have a more coherent system and be more relaxed in their state. And typically, as I'm working with the human being, I'm watching my horses. My horses are letting me know when that person is getting more congruent, more coherent, and when they're not, when they start to get stuck in the energy, stuck in the old story. It's really quite fascinating. People can have a complete change in the interaction that they're having with the horse simply by changing their inner dialogue, which then changes the arousal or tension level in their body, which then changes how that horse wants to respond to them and then gives them a different result. And so, I'm very body centered when I'm working with people. So it gives them a real understanding that, hey, we're just not brains in a body. We're whole beings. We have a body, we have our brains, we have choice on which emotions we want to entertain, which thoughts that we want to entertain. We have a choice about how to release some of the old trauma story type stuff that we have so that we can get freed up and have more energy going to where we want to go, which is our creative, expansive, expressive self.
When you're working with someone and the horse, are they just in the horse's presence? Are they like petting them? Are they riding them? What might that look like? Just an example of that interaction.
Yeah, that's a great question. It can look like all three of those, actually. My typical, when I'm working with individuals, have a space, it's called a round pen. And the horse is at liberty, meaning it has no halters, no ties, no ropes. It's completely free to do whatever it wants. And I prepare the person to enter into that space with the horse and have an interaction with the horse. That can be anything that they want it to be within some parameters. Um, but this idea of horse at liberty, human being with no huge instruction really creates a space where unknowns can come up, creative energy can enter in, and the horse and the human commingle and interact, and sometimes don't interact, right? And that's information in itself. But everybody has choice. And so the horse interacts with that human being how they want to. For my herd, they've been doing it for many, many years. They know exactly what they're doing. So they're very purposeful as they interact with those human beings. In other programs, I'll have a person with a horse, and the horse has a halter with a lead line, and maybe that person is leading the horse through what we call an opportunity course, which is a bunch of obstacles that they have to help the horse go through. Each obstacle represents something in their life. Other activities can be horses at liberty, and you have more of an agenda, and you're moving them someplace. We call that more of the active work. So sometimes the horse is tied and somebody's grooming and petting on them. Sometimes the horse is at liberty and they're grooming and petting on them. So it's not ever really one thing. It's guided by the horse and can be different experiences serving different purposes. Often leading a horse with a lead line is really wonderful for developing leadership. Being in the round pen without any sort of control or confinement for the horse or the human except for the space is really beautiful work for developing presence and emotional agility, emotional understanding, energetic awareness. So hopefully that gives you a couple pictures.
Yeah. And I'm curious, have you had an experience where someone is working with a horse and they're surprised by the response of the horse? I'm thinking of maybe the horse is bringing to an awareness something that that person may not have been aware of, or, as you said, that congruence, there are some incongruence within them that they're not aware of, or are folks who are working with you pretty self-aware enough to know that when they get interacting with the horse, it's pretty much in alignment with what they expect?
I would say the first. And, I always tell my students, because I educate people on how to do this process in my year-long certification program. I always tell my students, it doesn't matter who comes in to work with you. It doesn't matter how many PhDs they have. It doesn't matter if it's Oprah. It doesn't matter who it is. It doesn't matter how much work that they've done. They come in and they work with a horse, and that horse will reveal something to them that's going to be very worthwhile for them. Sometimes it's an enhancement of who they are in their most authentic, soulful expression. Sometimes it's a bit of like what you're saying. It's something that they're blind to that maybe is still affecting them. That's from the past, that's ready to be cleared, ready to be released, ready to be let go of. Sometimes it's something that arises that needs to be mourned. Most of the time, the horses bring forward something that people are not aware of or that they haven't seen at that particular level before. But sometimes, again, it's that enhancement of somebody's authentic, soulful expression in the world.
Mm-hmm.
All of the work moves people to a greater understanding of who they are at the most authentic level.
And for listeners who, as they're hearing this might be totally brand new to them, can you give an example of something concrete or relatable that folks can say, oh, that's something that working with horses helped that person with?
Absolutely. I think my favorite one is sometimes I'll work with larger gregarious horses, or like recently I had a young horse here. I had her for 4 years. And because she was younger, she didn't always fully understand boundaries. And some of those big gregarious horses, they might understand them, but they're big and gregarious. They want to play. They want to get into people's space. And one of my favorite sessions is when somebody comes to work with me and a situation arises. They're working with the horse and the horse is not really respecting their personal space, which would be that nice arm's length away from your body. Draw a circle around your body. That's kind of your personal space. But that horse wants to get right up in that space and kind of get into their space and maybe start, tugging on their sleeve, or, they want to horse around, basically. They want to treat them like another horse. And so it's always fun when I get to coach somebody on how to own their space and back that horse out of their space and keep that horse at that particular distance. And for many people who are overly kind, overly caretaking to others, give up their desires so that others can have their own way, basically have lived their life not having strong boundaries. They're the softies, which I was once. I still sometimes am. You'll see my horses boss me around a little bit. But when I'm working with somebody in those situations, when I get to empower somebody to really own their space and to let a 1,000-pound horse or a young, very angel-faced horse, to let that horse know, hey, you're not coming any closer. And I'm the leader here. And this is my space. And that person really claims their space. That is a deal breaker, life changer sort of session that cannot but just profoundly affect that human being's life. Those are my favorite.
Yeah. I'm just sitting here like, wow, how cool, and how visceral. It's an interactive thing. It's not something that I'm just coming up with on my own or a head exercise. I'm getting feedback visually and energetically right in front of me with that horse and that interaction, which I could see being really beneficial for folks to have that experiential awareness versus just coming to it through like a head exercise.
Absolutely. And it's one thing to, you go to a therapist and say, gosh, I just can't seem to communicate good boundaries with my 14-year-old kid. And they give you all sorts of ideas on how to, speak it and maybe even practice speaking it. But if your body isn't believing that you have the right to have your personal space and to feel safe within your personal space, and that you have the power to claim that space with others and to be able to own it again, then you're not going to actually be able to take the conversation that you had with the therapist or your coach back home and get that boundary established with your teenager. It's not going to happen until it's in the body. Yeah.
In the topic of introverts, I know you have some thoughts about why someone's an introvert and how horses support introverts. How do you see horses benefiting folks who prefer introversion?
So many people that come in have they are introverts. They prefer to be alone. And sometimes I wonder if they really are introverts, or if people that call themselves introverts are actually highly sensitive people who have been living their entire life with high sensitivities and have not been offered certain tools and processes to help them understand how to honor their sensitivities, but still be able to engage with others in a really helpful, expansive way. Through the programs, what happens for my clients is they start to understand their energy field, and they start to understand, again, how to own that energy field, how to enhance it, how to influence, how to build their energy field so that they are less affected by other people or the environments that they're living in. Which for me, I get introverted when I'm feeling overwhelmed by the external. I want to recoup. I want to hide. I want to pull back. I need my alone time. And lately, I've really been challenging that edge. Well, is that really true? Or are you feeding a story that you need that? And then I have to look at that and really examine what are my edges. And for me personally, as I've learned to respect and honor the edges of my comfort level around other people's energy, and then stretching that and stretching that and stretching that. I hope that makes sense what I'm saying.
Sure. And I know you also have some thoughts about animals, being an introvert and having people come onto your property or animals sharing with them, especially in the work that you do and where you live. What are your thoughts about having people on your property or sharing your animals with them? The reason I ask is I'm just gone through a week, actually 4 weeks of contractors in my living space, and being someone who prefers introversion, I am climbing the walls because I just don't have the energy changes when people are in the room and when the environment is not neat. I'll just say that when there are construction materials everywhere, it's really hard to relax. So when you talk about people on their property or sharing animals with them, what are your thoughts, or what have you learned about that?
Yeah, that was, when I first moved onto this property that I've been on for 6 years, I had to actually do a lot of renovation. I was really getting rattled by it. So for me, I had to really start defining what my personal needs were and how much I could take. The thing is, whether the contractor is aware of it or not, it's the person's responsibility to really figure out, okay, what are my personal needs here? And it, again, almost comes back to boundary setting. If these are my personal needs and then I need to have this other thing happening, then what are the parameters that I have to make sure everybody else understands so that they're respecting my parameters and I'm not getting blown out. So for me, with the remodeling of all the different buildings here, I had to find blocks of time that I would do that work, and then I would have blocks of time that none of it would happen. And then with people coming onto the property, when I first got here, I had people staying in the house with me. There was no boundaries whatsoever. And it was like living in a ping pong ball machine. And I didn't really get the importance of me having my sanctuary. And then each year, each program, I'd redefine, well, wait a minute, that was uncomfortable for me, and it doesn't have to be that way. So I can set a boundary. So now I have it set up so that people are on certain parts of the property. They're not on other parts of the property. Nobody even steps into my house during the program. With the horses, I have learned to become less sensitive to having different people interact with them, and I've really handed that over to the horses. They're big kids; they can handle it. I have, for the most part, I have very kind people that come here, and I can read my horses well enough to know when somebody might request to work with my horses, but I'm getting a hit, an intuitive hit, that that's not a good match, maybe for right now. Doesn't mean that someday that person might not work with that particular horse, but for where that person is energetically, it's not a good match for that particular day. And so I have to set those boundaries. So I'm constantly reading the energy of individuals, reading the energy of the group, reading the energy of the day, reading the energy of the weather, reading the energy of my helpers. And I'm modifying and rearranging the flow or setting different parameters according to what I'm reading. And as an introvert, I had to develop that skill at a greater level than what I thought I kind of had it. But once people started coming on my property, I had to learn it at a much, much higher level. Mm-hmm. And now, I can read it all pretty darn good. And I know what to do to take care of myself. And I think for many introverts, there's a lack of a realization of how much space they might really need. And the funny thing that happened for me is that once I actually started to get my space needs met, then I became less of an introvert. Once you take care of your own needs within your own energetic space and your own internal sanctuary, and also your external sanctuary, I think that some of those beliefs about being an introvert can actually change. We have to look at where we source our energy from.
Yeah, we're feeding ourselves, giving ourselves what we need first. And so if we have that space, we've created that boundary, then we can recharge. And then it's much more enjoyable to be around other folks when those opportunities arise versus someone who needs that space, boundary, or alone time and doesn't allow themselves to have that, doesn't create it for themselves. Or some folks feel selfish or rude when they ask for, their own space. What do you celebrate about introversion or being an introvert? What's the gift?
Well, I have this belief also that introverts are special people.
Me too.
Everybody's a special person, but I think that introverts are unique in that, when I watch my herd, it's often the quiet one in the herd that will be out in the field, and all the others are being gregarious and running around and doing all these silly things. And there'll be one horse that will be standing off to the side, not engaging, and they'll be watching, and they'll be the quiet one. And people will always think that the horse that's more gregarious and more forward with their energy and, just kind of all about all different stuff, just like humans, they'll think that, oh, they're the leaders. They're the ones that are really, leading the herd. And it's not always true. Often it's the quiet one that's the leader. Mm-hmm. And I think that often introverts make incredible leaders because introverts are incredible at observing dynamics. So, I can't remember what your question was. I think it was more on the celebratory level, like what can we celebrate with being an introvert? I think that we can celebrate that we are different. We are not the mass population. We're not like everybody else, but we can't be a victim because we're not like everybody else. We can't wish that we were extroverted. We can't make ourselves wrong in who we are. We have to really honor that, yeah, I'm the quiet horse out there in the field, and I'm the watcher, and I'm taking in everything, and I'm noticing everything. And because of that, I'm the wise one. I can see things differently than others. And that sometimes it can be frustrating as an introvert because we're not contributing as much. We don't feel like we have as much worth, or that we sometimes will wait for others to pull it out of us. But when we do speak, I think people listen because it's a different offering than maybe what has been offered up till that point. So I think, go ahead. I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, I was going to say, I totally agree. A lot of the leadership work and leaders I've worked with over the last 20 plus years is people appreciate quiet, like you said, that quiet confidence, that quiet competence. Since everything is energy, people pick up on that. So when that person is in the room, they're actually setting a tone for that room without even having to say anything. And then when they do speak, like you said, people really pay attention. It's really about the energy that we're carrying around with us. As you also mentioned too, how the world and society is geared to value extroversion, media and all the things that we read, see things and do. I mean, you're nothing unless you're an extrovert jumping up and down on The Price is Right. My second to last question is, I'm always curious, what feeds people's soul? What turns you on? What's inspiring you these days?
Yeah, today what's feeding my soul, I actually just got back from a week-long meditation retreat. So what I'm focusing on now is meditation as a way to change my brain waves, as a way to change who I am at that energetic level, and to get even deeper into this concept of the beingness versus, like what you said, being the doer, the jumping up and down, get acknowledged for everything that you do. That's a conditioned societal thing that's going on there. And I'm more interested in who do I be? And so for me right now, working with meditation is really big on bringing that into the work with horses. I have a new program called Quantum Horse, and we're focusing primarily on understanding these higher levels of energetics, how to work with the fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh chakras, how to enter into a meditative zone, which I perceive that the horses actually live in at a much higher level than we do. And so in a way, it's how to become more horse-like, how to really expand into a beingness and not be in that busy, busy, busy brain state. I mean, people are blowing themselves out. I mean, gosh, the people I've interacted just in this morning, 6 different people. I'm just like, okay, they're in their beta brain. They're not grounded. They are reacting to life. And I think that many of our apps and Facebook and social media, they're training us to be reactors. And I don't want to react. I want to respond. I want to be centered.
Yeah, and those apps and our cell phones and even email, they're socializing us into a false sense of urgency with all these notifications and sounds and colors that pop up, like, oh, I've got to see, who liked my post and stuff. They're socializing us into this false sense of importance and urgency that it's really easy to get hooked on. So unplugging from that can be really beneficial periodically. Well, thank you, Kathy. Where can listeners learn more about you and your work?
They can find me by simply Googling Kathy Pike or by visiting www.coachingwithhorses.com. And there's all sorts of things on my website. I've got just tons and tons of blog pages, and there's some free downloads, and front page has a beautiful download list on it for the newsletter. And lots of information there. And also they can search for my book, Hope from the Heart of Horses, at Amazon, or the chakra book, Pathways to a Radiant Self.
Great. Thank you once again. Very enlightening, very inspiring, and very wise words for us today.